We tend to think of development as something that just happens when we're kids, learning to walk, learning to talk, all that stuff. But what if I told you that's just the prologue? The real story, the one about who we actually become, well, that really kicks off right when we think we're all grown up.
So let's just start with a really big question, one that a lot of us have probably wondered about. At what point do we actually stop developing? I mean, is it when we graduate? Is it when we get that first real job? Or is it just when we hit a certain birthday?
Well, the answer, based on, decades of research, is actually pretty simple and kind of profound. We never do. Development isn't some race with a finish line. It's this continuous, lifelong journey. The whole idea that we're somehow done growing once we hit adulthood, honestly, it's one of the biggest myths out there.
Okay, so let's start by totally reframing what we think adulthood even is. It's not the end of the road. It's the beginning of a way more complex and, frankly, a much more interesting chapter of our growth.
So if you look up the formal definition, it'll tell you that adulthood is the stage right after adolescence. It's marked by things like maturity, independence, and responsibility. It's basically when we start stepping into all these key roles, as partners, as parents, as workers, you name it.
And what does that actually look like day to day? Well, it usually means hitting these big milestones, right? Making your own decisions, paying your own bills, building relationships that last, maybe raising a family, and just, finding your place and figuring out how you can contribute. But here's a really crucial question. Is this checklist for being an adult the same for everyone? Does it look the same in every single culture around the world?
Oh, not even close. And this is where things get really fascinating. See, in a lot of Western cultures, we tie adulthood to a legal age. You turn 18, you can vote. You turn 21, you can drink. But in many African cultures, for instance, adulthood isn't about a number. It's defined by taking on social responsibilities, like getting married or having a stable job.
And this quote right here really drives that point home. In a place like Nigeria, becoming an adult isn't about how many candles are on your cake. It's about what you do. It's about finishing your education, securing a job, getting married. It just goes to show you that adulthood is really a social idea, not just a biological one.
So if our development is this lifelong thing, then we're going to need a much better map to understand it, right? So let's dive into something called the lifespan perspective, which kind of gives us the rules of the road for this whole journey.
At its core, the lifespan perspective is this huge idea that our development is an unbroken line, all the way from birth to old age. It basically argues that we are always growing, always learning, and always adapting to whatever life throws at us.
Okay, so the first big principle is simple. Development is lifelong. And we're not just talking about physical changes here. Our minds, our emotions, our very personalities, they all continue to evolve. I mean, think about an adult who goes back to college to learn a totally new skill. That's a perfect example of this in action. Second, development is multidimensional. The best way to think about it is that you're not just one person. You're like a whole team of selves. Your physical self, your cognitive or thinking self, your social self, and then all grow together. A change in one affects all the others. For example, some major financial stress. That doesn't just stay in your wallet. It can absolutely affect your health and your relationships.
And third, our development is massively shaped by our context. Where you grew up, your family, your culture, even the economy you're living in. All of these things play a huge role in the specific path your life takes. All right, with those rules in mind, let's try to map out the major territories of adult life. Because even though it's one continuous journey, we can definitely identify some key stages along the way.
Psychologists usually break up our adult lives into 3 big chapters. First up, you've got early adulthood, from about 20 to 40. This is the building phase, right? High energy, launching careers, maybe starting families. Then you hit middle adulthood, from 40 to 65. This is often about managing everything you've built, and it's a time for some deeper reflection. And finally, there's late adulthood, 65 and beyond, which for a lot of people is a time of reinvention, thinking about legacy, wisdom, and staying connected outside of work.
But, and this is probably the most important thing to remember, that timeline is just a rough guide. Because while the map might look similar for all of us, the actual terrain we travel is totally unique. No two journeys are ever the same.
So what shapes your unique path? Well, 3 major things. First, your culture, which sets the expectations for family and social roles. Then there's your environment. Things like the economy can speed up or slow down your progress. And finally, it's you, your own personality, your health, your goals. They all make your journey completely your own.
To really make this concrete,
Let's go back to that Nigerian example. In that context, the super strong cultural values around family duty and respecting your elders, those are going to deeply shape an adult's priorities and decisions in ways that might be totally different somewhere else.
So if there's one big idea to take away from all of this, let it be this quote right here. Growth doesn't stop. Adulthood isn't some destination you just arrive at. It's the dynamic, messy, ongoing process of becoming. The journey, it really never ends.
And that really leaves us with one final question for you to think about. If you were to look at your own life's map, with all its roads you've already traveled and all the blank spots still ahead, what journey is coming up next on your horizon?